Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Troy. I'd like to welcome you to the Tech Careers for Non-Technical Backgrounds panel discussion brought to you by AIMS, the Association of Information Management Students and iSchool Career Services. AIMS is a student group at the iSchool focusing on the needs of the Masters of Science in Information Management student population. Kevin McCraney will be your moderator today. He's a second-year MSIM student, and he's specializing in data science and information architecture. He's also the finance officer for AIMS, and before the MSIM program, Kevin was a teacher and an instructional designer. I'd like you all to note also that we're going to be filming in here, so be aware that your voice and image might be online. Have a great time.
Sweet. So thanks for the intro, Troy. Thanks for coming, everyone. I'd like to say that the community and vibrancy that we feel here in the room and also from our peers attending on the internet are what make the iSchool truly great. So again, thank you. Basically, as Troy introduced, the goals of the panel are to think through the challenges and opportunities related to career change. Especially people that are trying to transition to a technology-related career from a sector that maybe doesn't use tech that much. This is a very personal issue for me. I used to be a teacher. I used to instruct people. I used to help develop curricula to help teach students more effectively. And at a certain point, I discovered that technology was really compelling for me. At the same time that I did a lot of informal work through like self-study and a lot of work in the classroom, I realized that I was having trouble making that effort visible to prospective employers. So what I hope to learn from our panelists here is some tools, some tips, some tactics to basically communicate the work that we put in as people that are trying to make that transition, and just learn from their experience because they did it. So we're gonna talk for about 45 minutes or so. We'll have some breakout time at the end, just sort of unstructured, sharing some of your like personal thoughts with the panelists, whatever you really wanna make of it. And then we're constantly taking questions via poll everywhere. The link is in the back of the room. So if something comes up in the course of our discussion, feel free to just, add your own take to it, and we'll see if we can like go down some cool rabbit holes, I guess. So for the two of you, I guess I would like to know a little bit about your background before school, specifically what made you want to change career paths in the first place, and just a brief introduction of who you are.
Can I start?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Ray Hua. I came from China originally, moved to the States. The first question is what made me want to make a career shift? Mm-hmm. I was completely survival focused with my background. My background was in, actually I had kind of like two. I was in German language, so I could have gone down the translator route, or I have another background in marketing and events, so I could have done like event management, but neither of that gave me like a job that supports my working visa here. So that was my motivation to change.
Okay.
Nice. I'm Louis Spinelli. So I studied life sciences in undergraduate, biology and chemistry, but at the time I was also working as a moving man. So when I got out of school, I worked as a moving man for a while. Then I joined the Peace Corps, and I got about as far away from technology as I could. I lived in Zambia in a community without any electricity, no cell phones, no computers. It was lovely. Since then I traveled a lot. I worked overseas, based out of Washington, D.C. as a consultant, working with the U.S. government and different, companies. But, I'd take breaks and work at a moving company and then go back and forth. And throughout that time traveling, I saw the world change a lot, from when I first joined Peace Corps, and I went in before iPods existed. And when I got out of Peace Corps and everybody had iPods and were listening to music and then smartphones. And a lot of stuff didn't quite sit right. So, you know, I remember in like 2004, maybe like 2007, having a phone, like getting a phone and being able to, you know, download articles from the New York Times really quickly in Africa. Like fast forward 3 or 4 years later with JavaScript and not being, you know, having to pay like 3 or 4 times as much to download anything from the internet. And I said, this technology is, you know, becoming more pervasive, but it's really becoming less accessible and less beneficial to lots of people. So I kind of started thinking at that time, you know, maybe it's time to go learn more about, you know, what's going on there.
Nice. So I'm hearing survival mode, and I'm hearing like ethical convictions regarding technology. Maybe.
I'd say interest driven.
Okay, it's still pretty good. So once you sort of got these motivating factors down for yourself, what were the obstacles that you faced in jumping through the necessary hoops to make the career change?
I feel like for me, the obstacles were like fear to fail, I guess, because I have been like an excellent student, always A in China, and facing this like potential career change. Now I have to give up everything that I've learned and then into a field that everybody is an expert except for me. So I think that was one of the biggest obstacle, just to, you know, trying to convince myself to continue. Yeah.
So I think as far as obstacles go, I think I perceived a lot more obstacles than maybe there were. I put myself out there a lot and thought, oh, you know, maybe I can get this job or maybe I can apply for this. And I didn't realize at the time that I was just totally, you know, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was applying for jobs that now in hindsight, I can say, oh, I was totally unprepared for that. Or clearly there was better candidates out there for those jobs. I just didn't know the things I didn't know at that time or what would make a good candidate. So in hindsight, I think, you know, a lot of the obstacles I perceived were me just really kind of putting being a step ahead of where I should have been putting myself out there. But also, I think that, you know, in areas where like, I think I tried to be confident, but I think it wasn't so much confidence, it was more of a willingness to embarrass myself at some point where I'd go into interviews and totally, you know, have to say, all right, is it gonna maybe be embarrassing, maybe not be embarrassing? But you know, when you get into those situations where you realize you're unprepared, kind of shift it to a learning opportunity where you start asking questions to the interviewers and find out what you're missing and what you can work on for later.
Nice. That's really cool. I definitely reckon with that same sort of imposter syndrome, fear feeling, and also like not being able to measure up to this idealized picture of yourself, perhaps, or just what you previously experienced. In terms of like setting levels and knowing where you are and knowing what is achievable within the career search, how do you like effectively navigate that space?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, so Lewis's experience, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think by nature, you know, when you're switching into a new industry or a new area. So for me, you know, I had a pulse on, you know, the international development community. If I needed advice, I could call up, you know, a bunch of people that I was in Peace Corps with and say, hey, you're now working for this NGO or for this company. You know, what do you do in that interview? When I was switching over to the technical area, you know, to tech field, I didn't have that peer group where I could call up people up that I knew and say, what do you do in these things? So I think by very nature, you end up walking into more embarrassing situations because you don't have somebody to tell you maybe you should wait to apply for that job. But I also don't think that's necessarily a bad thing as long as you kind of get the most out of those embarrassing situations. Maybe that's not really, you know, I would say just be, you know, prepared to embarrass yourself and not, you know, be shamed and just keep going. Does that make sense? What do you think?
Yeah, how do you feel about that?
In terms of like understanding if I'm ready to like even go into this or at what level, I feel like since I joined the program at MSIM, it's there are like courses to help me get there, and also like doing one of those internships to like to get out there and see, okay, what are the people like working in those fields, help me get a sense. yeah, is that what you were trying to get at though?
Yeah, I think that's pretty close. So there's the idea of like going out in the world and kind of checking your expectations by either like failing a lot or by making connections, and just bouncing your ideas off of other folks.
Yeah, and also while I was like doing my master, just reaching out to people who are already working, that they have the job that I want to get, and see just like what wakes them up every day and what keeps them up every night. And yeah, I feel like going to talk to people that is already in your dream job just brings up, yeah, so much.
That's really good.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And I think too, having been in the Emerson program and then known people, having a peer group to go to, and also a peer group where you have a reach out. So it's a lot easier to reach out to alumni now that were, at least there's a kind of a frame of reference or some similarity or a kind of an appropriate reach out to current, like people that were alumni, that graduated before me, really helped, I think.
Right.
Nice. So we've kind of discussed this peripherally a little bit, but I'm curious about how the MSIM in particular as a degree program like helped set you up for success in your later career.
Yeah, like I was here in 2014 and 15 and 16. I wonder how much the program has changed. It must have got even better, but I really enjoyed those hands-on projects. There were, like, of course, theories and methods, but there were also a lot of hands-on classes that I took. I think that helped me a lot. Like motivating us to put ourselves out there, either through internship or other practicums. I think the program pushed me hard enough to try that even. And in like retrospect, that was super, super helpful. I think it helped me to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, I think, I gotta say, coming into the MSIM program, I think I had expectations like everybody has, but I think it really expanded my horizons. Each class I took, I learned, more options that were out there, hands-on activities with people, group work. Not only was that really great experience as learning, but that's also really great kind of, maybe that's even better than networking. The people that I worked in groups with when I was in school are still people that I reach out with and feel comfortable. They know how I work. I know how they work. I can say, hey, you know me, how do you think I would fit into this role or that? And that's really good. That group work turned out to be really good networking and kind of building a kind of a stronger network of people while also getting hands-on experience and learning.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned group work because I think for many international students, like I feel when I first come to the States, I don't even know how to work with people outside of China. And so that is a great introduction course. Give me a taste of how it could be later in real world.
That's cool. Okay, so one of the things that I'm hearing is that project-based learning is incredibly helpful for the two of you, whether it's through the practical, like actual hands-on experience of doing the work itself, or so the thing that I've heard from the previous little dialogue is basically project-based learning is very helpful, perhaps because of the hands-on work that you end up doing, but also because of the connections that you make as you build the project. Would you say that's pretty sufficient encapsulation? Okay.
I'd also say, just to kind of add on to the MSIM program, in my current role, I work at a local company, and one of my bosses was a former coworker of one of my former lecturer professors. So just that network is really helpful, and I'd say even kind of rather than just saying it's just kind of, oh, I know this person, so this helps, but kind of having that professional discourse with real professionals. And I think the lecturers and the professors at UW and iSchool are kind of great resources to ask questions to, bounce things off of, go to, I took advantage in class of asking questions or going to office hours. And having that experience, kind of practicing professional discourse, speaking with the faculty and staff here, really helped me, be able to speak about the work I do coming out of school.
That's really good, and that brings me to a perhaps more reflective question than some of the ones that I've asked. I'm curious, since we've sort of talked about the importance of like bouncing ideas off your peers, engaging with professors, members of the community, and so on and so forth. What's a piece of advice that you've encountered from those folks that absolutely did not work for you? Maybe it's because they didn't understand like where you were coming from exactly. But.
Yeah, I have a lot, but I will share one top. I got this advice again and again from so many people that I should drop design and start coding. It was like such a hot trend, at least when I was in the program. Everybody was coding, and that was like real good pay, and there are also a lot more openings, like job openings for software developers than designers, and to be successful as a designer, you also need to be articulate, and that's not my strongest feast, I guess. So I got advice that I should do that, and I tried it. I sneak into CSE classes, and I guess I could follow along for a couple courses, but then as soon as everybody starts to draw circle with their computer, I dropped out. It's just not for me. But I think I'm glad I tried it, but I'm also glad that I realized it's just not for me. I guess my lessons learned from there is you will be exposed to so many devices, and they may work for many, many people, and many, many people could become successful following that advice, but it doesn't mean it's like the golden truth for you. You have to understand what you love and what you want to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with the sentiment that there's a lot of advice out there, and it might not all be applicable at any specific time or for you. I think back to when I got out of Peace Corps, I have a good buddy who he wanted to apply for jobs with the federal government, and he got a lot of advice from people, and they got him into interviews. So he was able to get his foot in the door and get into these interviews, and then he comes back and he says, "Oh my God, it was terrible." First thing is, if you have to have a 3.0 and a college degree with a 3.0, but he didn't have a 3.0 in college. So he was able to get into interviews that he wasn't actually able to accept a role for, because he didn't meet some of these criteria. And I think for me, when I started kind of moving into tech, I started taking programming classes, and I got to this point where I was like, oh, maybe I can do some projects and get a job as a programmer. And I started looking around, and people would give me advice, but none of the advice was applicable to me because I didn't have a college degree in programming, and I didn't have kind of an institutional backing that was trustworthy. So I couldn't go to Google and say I want to be a developer, because they'd say, "Oh, do you have a CS degree from somewhere?" No. And but a lot of that advice I got then, coming out of the MSIM program, actually would be more applicable, because now I have an MSIM degree from the University of Washington. So now I would be in a place to actually follow that advice, whereas before I wasn't in a place to follow that advice. So now normally I kind of take a lot of advice as almost as like a tool in a toolbox, where I can say, okay, that's good. Let me just take note of that and remember that, and maybe it'll be applicable sometimes in some contexts, even if it's not helpful now.
That's really good. I like to personally reverse engineer the perspective of the person who's giving me advice sometimes. So I know where they're coming from better, and I can better integrate that. This is a bit of a paraphrase from one of our Poll Everywhere questions, but I'm wondering about the process of translating your skills and experience to somebody who might not be familiar with the kind of work that you've done previously.
Okay. So it's it's funny that how I landed on my current job. Oh, by the way, I'm an interaction designer at Google on Google Cloud. I just told the guys that I draw boxes and lines, but how I land on that job was because my manager, she was managing both a team in Seattle and also a team in Germany. And she saw that on my resume, I studied German language and in my undergrad, and she was sold. Okay, that's the guy we want. So I guess there are like a lot of random things that can happen. In terms of like translating past skills intentionally to your future employer, I think there are, just try to find the common, like for example, communication skill is very common. If you can show from your past work that you are a good communicator, that's almost always applicable to any other job. So I try to find those things, like be detail driven, be like a people person, for example, how my past work, for example, as an event manager, created me like as a people person. So yeah, I try to find those common areas.
I totally agree with that. So I work as an information architect. I'm not sure if I said that, but I work as an information architect here in town. And when I was looking at this role, I talked to a few former alumni from UW, I think the MLIS program. But you know, so I chatted with them. We went out for coffee, and one of the things they asked me was if I had experience as a consultant talking to people at, you know, different at an enterprise level. And one of their big concerns was, you know, they said, oh, you know, we'll definitely put your name in and support you trying to get this role. But, you know, are you good with clients, and can you manage clients and that work? And so totally different field, but that communication and interpersonal stuff really came in handy.
That's really cool. Just another question from the internet or from a poll everywhere. Everybody is curious how the program has prepared you, and specifically what you ended up studying. I totally neglected to have you introduce that when we began.
Yeah, so coming into the iSchool, I was thinking of you know, probably more towards technology and social change, and technology and you know, society and that interaction. But I was also interested almost tangentially in information organization and information architecture. So I really kind of split my time between you know, classes that were more geared towards more introspective, or you know, geared towards that side of things. And some of those classes that were offered when I was in school were Information and Social Change by Ricardo Gomez, or I took Information and Contemplation with Professor Levy. That was one of the really highlight of the course load I took. But then I also took an Information Architecture specialization, where I took classes with Bob Boyko and Mike Down. So it's almost two tangential things, but actually both of them really provide talking points, you know, in job interviews and with clients and work. So I think, you know, sometimes things might seem different, but that they're actually really, really kind of beneficial and kind of compound each other. So, you know, any role that I've been in as an information architect, it always touches on data science and data modeling and structuring data. And, you know, I've worked on projects with clients where I've run into former classmates that while we were into iSchool, we took a totally different course load, and I never saw them after the first year. And then I run into them on a project where we're working on the same project, you know, in business, which is really fun when you run into somebody that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, I don't think I completed any like specific track, but I did try to like just pick out those design classes as much as possible. And I remember at that time, iSchool was also having collaboration with other schools. So there were like some courses offered by human-centered engineering and HCDE, yeah, design and engineering, that we can like take as well. So took advantage of that. Yeah, I was pretty focused. But I did also try some of those data sciences classes. I guess part of it is that at that time when I picked the course, I still haven't given up my friend's advice to like do some more code heavy and yeah, science heavy stuff. So I kept that option open, but yeah, just didn't pursue much further.
Okay, that's really cool.
I would follow, you know, and I think when I was in school too, I really just kind of followed my passions, but I took, you know, I took classes that I thought were really interesting, and there's such a breadth of classes that I think, you know, it was really helpful for me to take like, you know, to have a specialization to kind of tether me to something, but there's just such a great amount of courses that are really interesting that I kind of did a little bit of both, where I took kind of a core and then other classes a la carte.
Yeah, and that helps because, like you said, that helps you to have a lot more talking points when you talk to either like future employers or just clients. Because, for example, as a designer, like there has to be a subject that we design for. It's like healthcare or, you know, cloud computing or whatever. You gotta understand and have that some domain knowledge in that. So having some background in various areas always helps.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've also experienced the same sort of thing. I use the specialization as like a nice guideline, but I really just go deep on the stuff that I care about. I'm like really into natural language processing, but I also care about the design side of things as well. So yeah. I'm curious, mostly because we've sort of subtly talked about this in some ways, but are there any like trends that you see in your field or particular issues that you feel like you have a better grasp on, or maybe a more nuanced take on than your peers because of your like non-traditional background?
So I have to think.
Yeah, it's okay. You take your time.
I think I have a less of a fear of missing out on trends a bit, you know, and in a kind of a sense, I came into it, and when I started coming into it, I came into it through learning to program, and it was, you know, AI classes were hot, and this was hot, and the more I learned was, you know, they had their peaks and, you know, ebbs and flows. So, you know, you could read some, you'll read AI was hot in the 60s, and then it was really, you know, information systems again were big in the 80s, and so now I think that as long as I kind of have that steady incremental improvements and kind of understanding and build a solid foundation, I'll be okay, and I don't really have to jump on the next trend. But I think coming in, I was a lot more concerned about making sure I knew the most current knowledge, and now I think I can fall back on, you know, a good foundation and say, you know, I can look at it more as a strategic area and choose to kind of follow a trend or not.
Yeah, for me, working as an event manager before, I felt like I am more solid in managing work and managing work dependencies compared to my peers or like other designers. It's just a lot of my everyday work is making sure that I have what I need in order to unblock myself and what I need to do to block other teams. So I felt my past work has prepared me for that.
Nice. So like baseline project management. Kind of
Yeah.
Okay.
Project management for myself.
That's cool. I found that as an instructional designer as well, we have a lot of like deadlines that we have to meet in order to produce a course and that sort of work. So.
Right.
Another question from Poll Everywhere. When you finished the program, what did you do first to help you find direction?
Direction
in your career?
What was that first thing?
For me, after graduation, I did a research program at the same time, but I started reaching out to people who had the jobs I wanted. So I reached, and mostly former alumni and people that I kind of, you know, were introduced to via professors or via conferences I had been to while in school. So I had gotten to an information architecture conference that it was just kind of happenstance that it was in Vancouver. Met a lot of people in the industry. And then so when I got out of school, I started contacting them, you know, either having coffee in person if they were local or having coffee over video chat and then meeting with other alumni.
Yeah, so the question was after coming to the program or after going out?
Oh, after graduation.
After graduation. I feel it's probably not quite applicable because I felt I have a very good focus during the program already. I think what got me realize what I really want to do is my internship. Before I started doing that internship, I was like, oh, exploring, maybe it's for me. But after that, I'm so sure, and I was launching to that dream job, hoping to get that after graduation, like right after. I think part of it is also the pressure as an international student. We have to land in a job as soon as possible in order to like continue to stay in this country. Yeah, so didn't do much exploration after graduation. Had to get a job.
That's okay. So to expand on that idea of just feeling pressure to get a job, what advice would you give to someone who's nervous about the prospect of applying for jobs, especially like when they read the proverbial must have 10 years of experience at the bottom of the description?
Yeah, ignore that. Seriously, ignore that. I can very easily be just a copy paste from another job description template. And I'm serious, like they're probably not looking for 4 years of working experience. Your like hands-on projects and your internship might be just good enough for landing in that job. Yeah, let me think about that for a little bit more.
I definitely agree with the copy and paste for job, descriptions and things. And I think a lot of my peers have had similar experiences where, their jobs are not what their job descriptions were, or maybe loosely aligned. But I also, I think having almost like a good ground game, but really kind of reaching out to people at the company and filling in those gaps. So when you're applying, you do know a few people already that work there, or you had coffee with a few people, and that goes a long way to kind of getting a foot in the door, or at least knowing what you're getting involved with.
Yeah, and the advice I was given was also like starts to practice early, so that when your dream job opportunity comes to you, you are more prepared. So starts to do more starts to do more interview, even if it's just a phone interview. It will make you better in talking about your work and talking about yourself. And when that like big opportunity comes, you will feel more confident. I think that helps to reduce the fear just little by little.
That's a good point, because I think it's almost like your interviews when you're after graduation, it's almost a culmination of the entire program. So you're really starting to prepare for your interviews on your first day of class, and the first when you're bouncing questions off professors, that's pretty much the same thing as an interview, to some degree. So the more opportunities you take while in school to kind of put yourself out there, chat with people, to take every project seriously, do all of your readings. If you don't finish readings in a quarter, do assigned readings over the breaks just to catch up. Because I couldn't finish all the readings in a quarter sometimes, but finish readings over the quarter. And then when you go into interviews, you really have a lot of kind of stuff in your back pocket to talk about. And you've already practiced, asking questions, and you've already practiced, talking about the work you do.
Yeah, like on the topic of just keep talking about the work, an idea came across my mind just now. Maybe you could practice with your friends and like strangers in a bar. See how fast you can get people interested in what you're doing and in yourself. Imagine everybody you encounter is a like an interviewer basically, and see how that helps you. That could be an idea.
Wow, that's fascinating. I've not thought of that. That's really cool.
Actually, I think the bar, like just strangers, might be even, especially when people are working with kind of complex or nebulous areas like data science or information architecture, explaining it to a stranger it's probably really good practice for, it translates really well to, a meeting with a client that might not know your specialty.
Yeah, and you probably think, people in a bar, maybe they're not focused and they had a long day, they're not interested in listening to me, but you think an interviewer is any different? No. they also have a long day and they're not focused. They're thinking about what their bosses are telling them. So yeah, yeah, for sure, try to grab people's attention as fast as you can.
That's really cool. They're probably thinking about lunch too.
Yes.
Let's see. So we've kind of talked about this, but I'm wondering if you can just like say it outright. What, in your opinion, is the biggest thing that got you your first full-time job after you graduated?
Like biggest advantage or?
Like biggest personal advantage, biggest project, biggest whatever that means to you.
Should we take
So
them?
this got cut off. I had put a colon there, and I thought by pressing enter, I could.
Oh, okay.
Basically, the intent was like if you could stack rank the biggest percentage of like impact of what got you your job between like internship, specific class skills, or like what you said, you know, reaching out and getting coffee with people, or going to World IA Day. Like out of maybe like those big categories, those broad classifications, what should a student put their weight into, or make sure that they are devoting a critical amount of time to for that first position, I guess.
Hard question.
So I really lucked out, I feel like, so my first position, there's a person at the company leaving, and I had done my capstone with Jinha Lee and a couple other students, and the person at the company that was leaving also had done research for her capstone project with Jinha Lee. And so Jinha, I think, might have mentioned, oh, you should reach out to her and have coffee. So we were chatting, and she said, hey, somebody from, I'm leaving, they're going to have an opening, I can put your name in. And at the same time, one of the people who runs the company was a coworker of Mike Doan, and also knows Bob Boyko. So it was really kind of a good situation where I could go in. They knew people I had classes from, and there was the person I was replacing had gone to University of Washington and done research with Jinha Lee just coincidentally too. So it was really like a culmination of things. And I also think it helped that I was prepared just from taking classes seriously and doing that work. But it was really, I think, a culmination of, it was lucky.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of luck. I feel like a lot of luck in how I landed in my job as well. But I will say, as like someone who changed career direction, I think most of my time still went into classes and just making sure I have the basic knowledge in this area, that I'm not talking too much like a layman, and I'm speaking their language. So I think 70% in the classes and books, and maybe 5% in like reaching out to people, just because I'm very introvert. Should have done maybe 20%, but yeah, that's, I guess, my rough estimate. So depending on our situation.
Nice. That leads in really well to a question from Pull Everywhere again. In those situations where you have done all of the reading and you've done as much work to be conversant in this field, and you're in the right place at the right time, and you have coffee with the right folks, when you get in the room, how do you actually mitigate fear or imposter syndrome? How do you handle that?
In the interview room?
Yeah.
I muddle through. No, but I think everybody has fragmented knowledge, and especially in the tech sector where people have all gone to different schools. There's almost this idea that everybody's going to come into it with a shared language, but I'm not sure there's a common language out there. So you end up with people that went to Carnegie Mellon and they speak, they might talk about HCI, human computer interaction, but have the same job as somebody that went to Michigan and talk about, human-centered design, or you'd have to talk about that. So I think that there's a lot of people out there all speaking slightly different languages. So I don't think anybody's expecting, somebody to walk through the door and expect them to speak the exact same language as them already. So I think that fear, that you're going to be the one that has a different language is like, I felt that way, but I think I now, kind of expect that everybody will use slightly different terminology, and there'll be some confusion around that, but eventually you'll get through that and figure out what everybody means.
Yeah, I can completely relate to the fear that, that's the panel. They are all experts. They had worked here for 5 years, and I just did like, yeah, some school. Why do I deserve even to be in this room? But there's gotta be something that you know that they don't know, and try to like spot those things, or even prepare to know those things before you go into that room, and have that like give you positive energy. And I can give you an example. Before I go into my interview, I know that they're all going to be Google designers. They are like excellent in this field, but maybe none of them speak German, or maybe none of them speak Mandarin. The moment I start to speak in Mandarin, they will all be idiots. And just things like that to help you feel really positive and make you feel really big. It gives you confidence when you walk into that room, and that makes a difference. And I was also really, really lucky, maybe also unlucky. The person who are supposed to pick me up to take me to the interview room were 20 minutes late for an hour session. And that was like a huge like cost to me, because I have to talk super fast and maybe I cannot finish. But I realized that gives me a lot of advantage, because they are at guilt. Like they will feel so sorry for me. Like if anything I can complete, they'll like give me thumb up. That's actually how I like was thinking. And I guess my advice is just try to realize those things help you feel positive.
So this isn't my idea that I'm about to relay, but I've been planning an information architecture event over the past few months. And one of the ideas that came up from people in the community that have much more experience than I do was the idea of having reverse mentorship. And there's a lot of senior, people in the field, information architecture field, that said, hey, I haven't been in school in 20 years. I'd really love it if we could have a reverse mentorship session. What's that? So all of you guys coming out of school, you guys go to UW and you guys do these other programs. You come out with all of this fresh knowledge, these new methodologies, this information that we don't have, that wasn't taught in school when we were in school, 10 or 20 years ago. And that was an idea that came out of existing professionals. So I think even in Seattle, there are professionals out there that recognize that they might have on-the-job experience, but they don't have a lot of long-term knowledge that new students are coming out with. And they're thinking like, oh, I'm really interested in that as well. So some people might be looking at the interview as a learning session for them to learn from you as an interviewee.
That's cool. Yeah. This is maybe something for offline, but I'm curious how you're cultivating that within the community of information architects here. So we can talk about that later, perhaps in the unstructured section. Maybe shifting gears a little bit to a pretty popular question on Poll Everywhere. What advice do you have for students who are currently looking for internships, maybe first years, or people that are considering doing an internship and hoping it'll lead to a full-time job in their second year, but they're still focused on learning technical skills or acquiring technical skills?
Advice for I felt I almost wanted to say that an internship is not only a place for you to succeed, but also it gives you room to fail. So like don't kill yourself over an internship, or like during an internship. It's still, a period. It's like 6 months thing. But yeah, I'll keep thinking if I have more better advice.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of time I spent looking at job descriptions and then trying to prep myself for interviews quickly and learning technologies that I ended up, not really having to have learned for the job itself, and doing that aspect. Not that that's time wasted, but I think that anytime you're applying for especially internships, they're not really expecting a fully formed employee probably that they're going to get real tangible work out of over that time. So it really is a time where it's maybe a safer space to come in and tell them in an interview for an internship that you're learning these technologies and that you'd really like experience trying it out on the job. But I think it really is just to be open and honest with them in the interview process that says you're really excited to get experience with the technology, that you don't necessarily have like a fully robust, knowledge around yet.
Something I think I would like to add on is like when you are interviewing for the internship, or you know, when you were, yeah, I guess when you were interviewing for that internship, try to get a sense if they have a well-structured internship. If they are just looking for some random people to take on some very trivial task, that's a red flag to me. Try to ask if like, what's the structure? What's the expected outcome? What is the project? That helps you get a sense of how much you can achieve in that internship, because that will go onto your portfolio, go onto your resume, and gives you like talking points when you are facing the like real job interview. So you want to like, you want your employer to be prepared for this interview as well. Because I do have colleagues that they had very bad internship experience, and that affected their like future job.
And I think that advice actually, it goes past internships just to your normal job search, to find a job that's a good job with a good company that's supportive, with good mentorship. And in interviews, you know, for an internship or a job, ask about the scope of the role. You know, the scope of the role matters, and what tasks you'll be assigned with, or you'll be in charge of. So I think scope is always a good question, because you don't want to get caught on a runaway project, or you know, you want to know it. Yeah, you want to know in advance how successful something could be.
Yeah, basically make sure that your manager or a mentor have you set up for success.
I totally agree. In my experience with my internship, it was very much a two-way street. I knew what I wanted to get out of it. They knew like sort of vaguely what the project looked like at the end, but there was a lot of flexibility, and that's really what drew me to it. I didn't want to do something menial like you just described. That definitely is a deal breaker, red flag sort of scenario.
And I think, yeah, mentorship is another big one too. Just, you know, positions where you can get, you know, you work with people that are more experienced with you, and you're not left on your own, you know, completing a project by yourself over a summer. You know, if you can get on a team project, or you can see that you're going to be embedded with a group of people that are more experienced than you are, that's a great situation.
Yeah, and another tip for international students, again, like be prepared that you might not get that job like converted to full-time. Don't like have too high expectation of that. Oh, I have to do this so well. If I do it well, I will be converted full-time. I will get that like that working visa, because things change. There's so much uncertainty that's out of control of your manager, out of control maybe even of the HR people. So be prepared that you might not get this job, and it's not anything you have done wrong. It's just, it won't work out. Go find the next thing as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'd also say one thing that's daunting during job searches and internship searches is not hearing back, or doing interviews and not getting roles. But I don't think that, I think that even those contacts and those interviews, you get experience yourself, but you also kind of expand your network, and those people know you're out there. And the next time there's an opening, they'll remember you when you come back for an interview a year later or 2 years later. So if you do an internship somewhere and you don't get that role, you know, right out of school, and you go work at another company a year later, 2 years later, you could apply to that company, and they'd say, oh, hey, we remember you from your internship. Welcome back. You know, we're really happy that you kept us in mind. You've improved a lot. And, you know, we're really glad that you're still, you know. So I think, especially with career changers, one of the things is that you really have to demonstrate is that you actually, it's not a kind of a whimsical or capricious change, that you actually care about what you're doing, and you're in it for the long haul. So if you do go to interviews, and they might look at your resume and say, oh, there's not enough experience, I've only been in this for a couple of years. We don't, you know, they might not be interested in data science or business intelligence in 2 years from now, but 2 years later, if you're still out there and they say, hey, you came in for an interview 2 years ago and you're still doing it, then they really know, it really signals that you're serious. So yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this just now with us, but part of the career transition is like keeping your eyes on the prize like years from now and stuff. How do you keep up your optimism or your hope in a really competitive job search process, perhaps when you're not hearing much back, or perhaps when your position isn't getting converted, something like that?
have to keep move on. What other choice do we have? Trying to think what keeps.
Yeah, I think there's when you're kind of looking at the success of a process, there's a couple of ways to look at success indicators. And one is, I've reached out to this many companies, and you can feel good about the amount of work you've done up front preparing and reaching out and interviewing. And that's kind of in your control. And then there's that other aspect that's really not in your control. And that's, do you get jobs? And it's really hard if you're on a job market, because you might be applying for jobs that are, you might go in out of school and somebody else applies that has 5 years experience, and you might not get that job, but it's not your fault at all. It's totally out of your control. But I think in those situations, for me, I had a good peer group from MSIM that, everybody kept in touch, and, we'd get together and chat about how everybody's job search is going on, and kind of get together and kind of look at maybe openings that we could, people could work towards. So I think that peer network really kind of helped, make things feel more attainable.
Yeah, and talk to your friends. I guess maybe it's like, for example, my cousin, she is looking for an internship. She is in IT as well. She is software engineer and is looking for internship. And she came back to tell me, sister, I have applied to all the IT, she's in France, by the way. I've applied to all the IT companies in France, and I haven't got any single right back. What am I doing wrong? And I told her, maybe it's not you doing anything wrong, but have you tried other kind of companies that has IT department in it? It's probably just, maybe you are not seeing some small things makes you feel, oh, you have done something wrong, but it's not you have done something wrong. Just try something else. Yeah.
Just keep trying new things.
Yeah, we talk to our friends.
And I just thinking on that with friends too, and in our group, you graduate and everybody's looking for jobs at the same time, and some people will get jobs sooner than others, and people get stressed and they say, oh my gosh, this group of people have jobs, I don't have a job yet. But I'd say everybody's experience is unique, and there's so many tangents out there. So somebody might be looking for a job specifically in bioinformatics. Another person might be looking for a job at this company. Another person might, be less, might not have as many constraints and be happy to take the first job. So I think when you're looking for jobs and it's really hard to size yourself up against peers, because everybody has different metrics and everybody's kind of has different goals. So if your goal is to attain this type of job, somebody might seem like they're looking for a similar job, but it might not be quite the same. So it's really hard to kind of judge yourself, so don't feel guilty, or just remember everybody's experience is unique, and be perseverant.
That's really cool. I think that's a pretty good note to move to the more unstructured time on, perhaps. So I guess maybe as closing remarks, what would you like to just say to everybody who's about to go onto the internship search or job search?
I'd say, it's looking for a job is a job in itself, and looking for an internship is a job in itself, especially when you're in school and taking classes. But, so it's a lot of work. But, speaking from a few years out, once you're working, it's a lot of fun. And, working in a new role, in a new field, it's worth it. So.
I probably will say that, all the job descriptions are the same, but you are unique. So when interviewing or trying to land in a job, show them how you can make this job more let it shine in the way that you shine. I think that creates this sense of that you want to own it. You are responsible for it. You're not just any people that can fit in perfectly in this job description. You are you. So yeah, be confident.
That's great. That's an awesome note to end on. So I guess thank you to our panelists. And